Ivan Eland is a senior fellow and director of the Center on Peace and Liberty at the Independent Institute, and he joins us now live from Washington for more analysis. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Now, just looking at the statements that we've been hearing from U.S. officials following the talks that were held between U.S. Secretary of State and Defense with Zelenskyy, the U.S. seems adamant in trying to defeat Russia. How far do you think the U.S. is willing to go to help Ukraine at this point?
Well, they're certainly ratcheting up the rhetoric. They're saying Ukraine is going to win, and the United States will try to weaken Russia for the long term so they don't try another invasion such as this. So I think it's ramping up. I think you're still going to see the fact that the United States does not want a direct confrontation with the nuclear Russia, but I think they're less timid now as the war has gone on about taking steps that would cause Putin to use chemical weapons or perhaps a tactical nuclear weapon. But I think they're less scared that that's going to happen now.
We did hear from Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov saying that the weapons that are delivered to Ukraine from the West will be legitimate targets. What do you think that means? How do you think Russia will retaliate to the heavy armor that we're now seeing delivered to Ukraine and that poses a threat to Russia?
Well, the key distinction, they don't say where they would attack that. If they attack it in Ukraine, it's fair game. And they did hit some train stations, 5 train stations, and stuff like that has to come in by rail mostly because it's inefficient to bring it in otherwise. So I think if they hit it in Ukraine, it's legitimate. If they hit it in Poland or some other NATO country, then they're going to have a big problem with NATO, and they don't want to do that. But still, I think Ukraine is a huge country, and there are ways to get things in there. So I think it's going to be a formidable problem for the Russians to stop the weapons coming in. And the U.S. has the best logistics system in the world, and that's really the key, the heart of any military. And so I think the weapons are going to get there, most of them.
The U.S. and the EU as well has been criticized for acting too late in imposing sanctions on Russia and delivering much needed weaponry to Ukraine. Do you think that they acted too late? Do you think that if they had taken these steps earlier on in the conflict, they could have avoided many of the atrocities that are happening today?
Well, I mean, you can make that claim, but I think it takes large organizations like NATO and the EU. They have to get consensus, and I think Biden administration, as far as NATO and the EU itself, as far as their countries, they have to go by at least most of the countries agreeing to do what they're doing. Otherwise, especially with sanctions, or it's not very effective. And also with the weaponry too, I don't think they want to get out in front of what other countries are doing. And so it takes time to get consensus, and these things are often slower than Mr. Zelenskyy would like. But I think it's been a unified response over time. And that's quite remarkable, actually, because these alliances are sometimes, whether it's the EU or NATO, are sometimes very fractious. So I think they've done a good job in pushing back against Russia and getting the weapons there. And also they've implemented very serious sanctions. Now, whether the sanctions are going to have a political effect, they're certainly going to have an economic effect, I think. But the history of sanctions has been very mixed at best about whether they can achieve their political goal, especially for big goals like getting Putin to pull out of Ukraine, which I don't think they're going to be a factor, but it's not going to be determinative. It's going to be the weapons that force Putin out if he gets out.
All right, Ivan Eland, thank you so much for joining us here on Tier 2 World and sharing that insight with us.